Hey there, Melissa Dunn here with the Melissa Dunn Realty team, and I am joined today with Latham Pugh of National Title Group. And Latham's going to talk to us a little bit about what an escrow officer is, kind of what goes on in the title world, and what you need to know as a buyer. So hello, Latham. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, Latham, give us a short little intro about who you are and who National Title is.
Yes, absolutely. So again, Latham Pugh, and I've been in the title business for 16 years. And my family has been in it for about 43 years. And so we are a group that handles everything from the conventional residential transactions to refinances, obviously, as well as we handle commercial transactions throughout the country. And but all of our focus is right here in DFW and getting deals closed.
Yeah, we absolutely love working with you guys. You were very helpful. So I'm going to jump into the questions here, Latham. So you just, I'll ask you the questions, go ahead and answer them. And then if we have any other questions, once the course is over, our buyers can always reach out to me and then I'll get them an answer. Okay.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Okay. So pretty general, what is an escrow officer and what do they actually do?
Yeah, great question. So an escrow officer is a licensed position with the Texas Department of Insurance, and they are the ones who are ultimately responsible for the closings that come through our office. So it's a large responsibility, right? They're handling a lot of money. There's a lot of moving parts that are being worked. And the escrow officer is the one who ultimately will work with the lender, and they put together a settlement statement or a CD, a closing disclosure. They work with the lender to get that perfect, which the lender then reviews with borrowers prior to closing. And then we also go over it as well once someone comes in for a closing. And, these times are a little bit different, but the standard is for buyers and sellers to come to the title company, and the escrow officer goes over the documents with them and gets everything executed, and then we get the transaction funded. And in today's world, that kind of happens a few different ways. There are some digital options, and there are some remote notary options. So we're just making it work so everybody can keep getting these properties closed.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and then so underneath an escrow officer is typically an escrow assistant or two, and that person is in the support role and handles a lot of the curative work and gathering tax information and payoff information and working through those things. So the escrow officer does have a large support network.
Yeah, I like to say you guys are kind of our middleman. You're a neutral party between buyer and seller, and you do a lot of the unsexy work that is so important.
No, it's totally right. I would call us the ultimate middleman, and we are the facilitators of a lot of conversations and communication amongst parties. But it is integral in getting these transactions closed, and that's why there's still human beings involved in the process, is because you need a lot of effort.
You do. Yeah. No, we are so appreciative of you. So one of the things that you guys do, you mentioned you do title insurance. So can you explain to our clients what exactly is title insurance and why is it important?
Yeah, so great question. So the standard practice in residential real estate is for the seller to pay for a title policy on behalf of the buyer. And that's how it goes down about 98% of the time. And so it's also a reason sometimes sellers offer to pay for a home warranty, right? Mm-hmm. You're getting ready to, they're selling a property. It's a large asset. It's an expensive asset. The buyer needs certain levels of comfort. No two ways about it. And that's very reasonable. And so a seller being willing to pay for a title policy on behalf of the buyer, what that does is we provide a title commitment during the contract process, and that outlines everything that has been filed of record that affects this property, positive, negative, neutral, whatever it is, it outlines that. So we're going and doing all the research, the examination of the title, We put all of those things into the title commitment. That's also where an underwriter or examiner would put any kind of requirements. Then once the transaction closes, we issue the title policy. And so it's our commitment to provide a title policy based on what they're reviewing during the contract process, so they can see if there's any restrictions or encroachments or anything like that. So they get all of that knowledge before they close. Okay. And so then ultimately they get issued a title policy, and we actually would issue two title policies. The first one would be the owner's title policy. So that's what your buyer would be receiving. And that's ultimately a title underwriter ensuring that this property that they are buying is free and clear of any issues or encumbrances other than what we have outlined in the title commitment. And so another role that we'll play in the transaction is we're also willing to ensure the accuracy of a survey. So a lot of buyers wanted to be able to depend on the survey and what they're looking at is accurate. And so that is another really, really strong product that we provide, is we're ultimately ensuring the accuracy of the survey. And Melissa, as you know, you get to choose that on in the contract on behalf of your buyer. And we just think it's really important. And then at the same time, we're simultaneously issuing a lender's title policy. And in this conversation, I'll assume that there's a loan involved most of the time. And so we're ensuring the buyer that the property's free and clear of any issues other than what we're outlining. And then we're ensuring the lender that they are in the superior lien position. They're in the first lien position, because that is so important, because if for any reason they were to have to foreclose, they want to make sure that any other liens that affect the property won't affect it going forward if the lender were to foreclose. So they want to be in that senior lien position on the property. And if a seller is paying for the owner's policy, again, which is typical, the buyer is responsible for paying for their lender's title policy, but it's not a double dip. The simultaneous issue rate is only $100. And then if the lender requires any endorsements, any add-ons to that policy, those would be on top of that $100. And they typically do require a couple of endorsements. So a buyer may get a settlement statement and see that there's some title insurance cost on there, and they would question that, saying, hey, I thought that the seller was paying for title insurance. And then that's when you would let them know that the seller is paying for the majority of it. They're just paying the nominal amount for their lender's title policy. So we're actually providing two different title policies at the time of closing if there's a loan involved. Otherwise, if it's cash, it would just be one owner's policy.
Awesome. Okay.
Is that clear?
Yes.
Good.
And so tell me a little bit about, and we're going to go over some of the terms that you just used when you were describing. So why don't you explain to us what exactly is a title commitment and why our buyers should care?
Mm-hmm. So that's the information that we're talking about that they get to review prior to closing. And also in your contract, the buyer has a right to review and object to any issues. So that's why it's always important when you're representing buyers to get as much time put into the space for objections, 5, 7, 10 days rather than like 2 or 3 days. So they have that much more time to review the title commitment and review the survey, because they really go hand in hand. And, that's when they'd maybe be able to see that there's an easement that's running through their backyard that wouldn't allow them to add the pool that they wanted to. Mm-hmm. Or that's possibly where they could see that their fence is 3 feet inside their property line, and they actually own 3 feet on the other side of that fence. And when they go to replace the fence, they can push it over and take that much more advantage of the land that they're buying. There could possibly be some restrictions. There could be deed restrictions in there that maybe you can't rent out the back house. And that was part of their plan. So it's the free information to review to make sure that there's no concerns that are brought up, or if they had any previous concerns, this would be the time to help answer any of those questions. Typically would be through the title commitment or survey.
Awesome. Okay.
And just on the survey as well, but with that survey as well, just being able to compare the two and being able to look at the survey and again, see where the fence is, see where the property line ends, Make sure that the house doesn't, overlap any building setbacks, especially if it's new construction. You need to make sure that you want to know that everything is, within the boundaries that it's supposed to be in. That plays into the same conversation as the title commitment, obviously.
Awesome. Okay. And you touched a little bit on deed restrictions. Can you explain to us a little bit more about what a deed restriction is?
100%. So the original developer of the neighborhood or anyone who owns the property can put restrictions on that property while they own it. And those restrictions can affect the property in perpetuity unless there's some kind of expiration or way to terminate those restrictions. And what's very clear in our title commitment, obviously there can't be any restrictions that inhibit someone's, kind of free use in regards to, any of the Constitution or any legal things, that anything illegal can't be added in there or whatever, in regards to, race or religion or anything like that. So that's a moot point. But those restrictions could be like, you can't paint the house red. It can be that simple. Or it can be said, there could be restrictions in there that it can't be used as a rental, kind of like what we talked about before. When you get up into some of the suburbs, you also, separate from deed restrictions, you're really going to be interested in what the HOA restrictions are. So that's kind of a two-part conversation. Are there any deed restrictions? If not, is there an HOA? And if there's an HOA, same thing. Got to spend the time to read it and understand. You're getting ready to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. You want to know what you're buying.
Right. I have a lot that I have listed currently where ages ago there was a deed restriction put in where you couldn't build a 2-story property. And it's in one of the older, more established neighborhoods in Dallas, and everything out there is being torn down in multi-million-dollar 2-story houses.
Was it in Preston Hollow?
Yes, yeah, and there's actually a workaround, I guess, where that was pulled back, and I think we're working through that. But it's that coming up through the deed restrictions and working through that with the buyers has been.
So my first home I bought in Preston Hollow, and there was a lady who was moving into the Park Cities because she had a daughter and needed to get into the school district. And the person who bought her house fell out of contract, and she was depending on that money. And so I stepped up to the plate, only to find out about the deed restrictions for 2 stories, because it was a tear down for sure. Yeah. And a builder can't make the profit on a 1-story house. And so literally for a couple of months, I went door to door and got the majority of the owners. It was literally specific to our block. And I got the majority of the owners to sign an amended deed restriction, right? So we were amending that restriction of 2 stories. I got the majority of them to sign eventually, and a builder was able to come in there. And, I can totally appreciate the nostalgia of neighborhoods. But at the same time, you can restrict yourself on the value that you're able to gain in that same property. So some of the people who originally were hesitant or didn't sign, they've come to me years later thanking me, because otherwise they would have only been able to sell their house for the house value. And at some point, the lot value surpasses that on older, smaller homes. Yep. So
that's what
there are some workarounds, and that's why we always got to kind of look into what those options are.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about another term that might come up for our buyers. What's an encumbrance?
Yeah. So that's just kind of a general term. An encumbrance is anything that affects the property, and therefore can be considered that it encumbers the property, right? So, an encumbrance is a deed restriction. An encumbrance is maybe any kind of like mechanics liens, like if money is owed to plumbers or someone who built the fence or whatever. Encumbrance is kind of a general term that just references things that affect the title. There's also exceptions. So there's encumbrances, but then there's exceptions. And when we reference exceptions, we're going to issue a title policy ensuring that this property is free and clear of any issues, but we are accepting to these things. We're accepting to the deed restrictions. We're accepting to the easement. We're accepting to the building setback lines. When we review the survey, we might see that the fence encroaches on the neighbor's property. So we're going to accept the fact that it encroaches on the neighbor's property. So we can't go out and fix all of those issues that a property might have. So we have to accept to them in the title policy, so that those don't come back on us. But at the same time, it's just a vehicle to make a purchaser aware of them.
Awesome. Okay. Well, so that's really all that I had for this video. I wanted to do, sorry if you can hear my kitty. I wanted to do just kind of an overview of, you know, what you guys do, kind of what to expect whenever and to look for whenever our buyers are going through the title process. Is there anything else? We'll do a more detailed video on going through a survey at a later date, but is there anything else that you feel like should be mentioned in regards to escrow and title?
You know, there's just so many moving parts, and lenders are so busy, and there are so many caveats to a real estate contract, to what we're doing, to getting an inspector like you work with. And so personally, I would want to advocate for people to get a licensed real estate agent like yourself to help them. Sometimes people feel empowered by the internet, but I just know the loopholes, and to have another person with knowledge advocate for you, there's a lot of value. Oh,
there you are.
Excuse me. There's a lot of value in that service, and reminding the buyers that that fee is typically paid for by the seller. So there's just a real advantage there, and a lot of people that don't have that representation, I see some issues.
Yeah, it can definitely be a more difficult process, to say the least.
But other than that, we're here to help as well, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. Well, Latham, thank you so much for joining us and helping us, and we'll catch you on the next video.
All right, sounds good. Bye.